Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the COVID series, where this time we have a repeat guest. We actually have Mr. Agostino Renna, who is a VP and General Manager of laminates and capsules at Amcor, a multinational. And he was there with us in the last meeting where he talked a little bit about global mega trends happening in the world of business before COVID and how COVID has changed all that. And we had talked a little bit about globalization as one of the trends. But the next trend that he'd identified was the content, and that's got to do with sustainability. So, Agostino, thank you so much for again talking to me and our audience. So, welcome back, and tell us a little bit more about this mega trend of sustainability.
Yeah, sure. So again, thanks for having me on the program here one more time. Dev, I must say, you promised me that we would go viral with this video. We would get like 3 billion views or something like that. So for those of you out there that log into this channel, go ahead and share and make it as popular as possible, because it's one of the reasons we invest the time is to disseminate this information and make it useful for whatever audience might have an interest. So thanks for having me again. Look, we talked last time about the 4 mega trends, right? And just to summarize, we honed in on globalization in the first episode that we did. Today we'll hit on sustainability, and then we'll move on to Internet of Things and the power of social media. Look, sustainability is a topic that I've always been extremely passionate about. Deva, you'll know my career with Johnson Controls and with GE. Both companies, for various reasons, had a keen interest in sustainability from a different lens, if you will. And now being with Amcor, we also focus very, very heavily on sustainability in terms of making sure that we operate our own business with the lowest possible carbon footprint or the lowest possible environmental impact. So we do a lot of things related to our own business and our own operations. But then equally importantly is we try to design our products so that they have the lowest possible environmental footprint from end to end. Okay, and it's, a lot of people have a tendency to look at this sustainability spectrum as a single point in the continuum. But what I would is it's important to make informed decisions by looking at the end-to-end carbon footprint of a fully manufactured product. Okay, so this idea of a life cycle analysis of the product to understand its true environmental impact is really important. So look, if we take a step back, similar to how we did with globalization, and I said this in our first exchange as well, really, this notion of sustainability has gone mainstream for a couple different reasons. And if you go back maybe 15, 20, 25 years and you walked into a classroom of 12-year-olds or 13-year-olds and you said the word sustainability, they would look at you like you came from a different planet. Today, if you walk into the same class, 12, 13-year-olds, perhaps even younger than that, and you talk about things like global warming, you talk about the importance of sustainability, climate change, etc., it's highly likely that those 12 or 13-year-olds will know exactly what you're talking about, okay? So to me, that in and of itself is the data point or the proof point that shows that this whole notion of sustainability has gone viral, for lack of a better term, okay? It's gone mainstream. So again, the driving forces behind this are 2 simple things: increasing population on the planet. And as that population continues to increase, you have a desire for a more and more convenient lifestyle. And as I said in the previous session, that convenience gets contextualized based on where you live in the world. If you are in an emerging economy, it is access to things like electricity, access to proper clean water, and other types of basic necessities. If you're in a developed economy, then certainly those things look different, right? You want more cars and more phones and more iPads and that kind of stuff. But generally speaking, it's driven, our interest in this topic is driven in the fact that, or driven by the fact that we have more people on the planet wanting to do more things. with a finite set of resources. Okay, so it's really the reason that this is becoming an important kind of force on most of the missions of many, many companies, regardless of what field of play you are in. Now, what I would say is, for having been around this space for a relatively long time, what people generally struggle with on this topic is the timeframes associated with sustainability and the topic of sustainability. For example, I use this simple analogy. It's not by accident that someone that unfortunately suffers a heart attack immediately changes their lifestyle, right? Weight loss, exercise regimen. And the reason is that the connection between action and reaction is instantaneous, and it's in a frame of reference from a timing perspective that we can relate to, right? Now, if I do the same and I say, hey, human beings, we need to change the way we're living, because if we don't, in 150 years, the planet will be in a really rough spot, okay? That time frame is difficult for most human beings to understand because it's not an imminent, urgent threat. And so when you think about sustainability from that context, I think that most scientists in this space would have enough evidence to prove that there are things in the planet right now that are misbehaving, and those things are on account of the way that we live on this planet. But most human beings, the man on the street, if you will, or the woman on the street, would say, you know what, things are kind of okay. You know, today doesn't feel much worse than yesterday, and tomorrow won't feel much worse than today. And so we could just keep doing what we're doing. So that's the point I'm trying to make, is people struggle with the time frames associated with this topic. Okay.
Sorry,
go ahead.
There. Sorry about that. But I think it's what you're raising is a very, very interesting point, right? Because the concept of sustainability has been around for quite some time, but people always mistook that for, you had things like corporate social responsibility, CSR, which got a bad rap for all the wrong reasons, because probably they were not focusing on the right thing. But your analogy to a heart attack is very interesting. But when I do have a heart attack, I will make changes immediately, right? For me, that's the whole thing. That is, for me, is the interesting point, because the difference between the analogy and actual sustainability is that if I have a heart attack, and of course, if I do care for my life and the ones that I have a chance to interact with, I will be making those changes. But what I actually get a feeling for is the fact is that, yes, that is happening, but there seems to be a tendency to not believe in this. And that goes back into exactly the point that you raised. It's not going to happen now. It's going to happen 150 years from now. And I need to be looking at my own sustainability, forget sustainability of the planet. And that, I think, for me, is a challenge that I think as leaders you face, is to make that balance between planet being sustainable, but also the livelihoods of the people today, in terms of making sure that they have a good quality of life. And to what extent do you think this is also true and a challenge that you face?
Yeah, look, I think you're spot on. To me, I also use a different analogy, which is that there is, and I'll make the segue to COVID-19 and how COVID-19 has sort of changed our perspective on this topic here in a second. But here's the second example that I would use is for anyone that has ever tried to lose some weight, okay, and I'm one of them. I'm one of those people.
That big stool. Yeah.
I mean, generally what happens is you kind of make some changes, right? You may eat a little less, or you're going to try to eat a little healthier. You may exercise a little. And at the front end of these changes, it feels like you're deploying a lot of effort for very little return. Okay? Meaning in the early stages, it doesn't feel like you're losing enough weight quickly enough. And so you start to question the effectiveness of the changes that you've made. And so in any, I think, significant change, you always have to just be committed enough to break through that initial wall of inertia, so that you can start to see results. And then those results start to build momentum. And with that momentum, you drive more change and more results. So how does this relate to COVID-19 now? if you accept the thesis that I just put in front of you, that there is this kind of wall of inertia that you have to just break through in order to convince yourself that the changes you've made are delivering outcomes. COVID-19 arrives, and if you look anywhere on the media, look at the clarity of the water in the canals in Venice. Okay? Look at the air quality in places like India and China that have historically had issues with air quality. Look at how quickly, so the point I'm trying to make is people are starting to get a sense for how quickly the planet is able to heal.
Yeah.
Okay? And it has come on the back of a forcing function called COVID-19 that has forced us all as a human species to dial down the extent of our activity. And as a result now, we've broken through, in my view, this wall of inertia.
Yeah.
And people have a visible display of how the planet could heal if we made some changes to the way we live.
Absolutely.
So I think that this COVID-19 will be an interesting kind of catalyst for a different conversation on sustainability. Let me pause there and then I'll make a couple of other points.
And I actually wanted to ask you a couple of questions actually here. One was actually a very interesting, two things, and I wanted to raise these two issues. The first thing I want to raise the issue is that there was actually a report yesterday that said that in the United States, I'm sure it's the case everywhere as well, that prices have been dropping for a lot of the consumables and a lot of things, except for, of course, food and certain things. Right? This is also accounting and controlling for drop in prices of oil and then things like that. So what we're saying is that, yes, COVID is trying to make sure that it's showing that all the things that's possible about how the planet can heal, but sustainability in the minds of many consumers and organizations comes at a higher price. So for example, you have all this talk about if I want to buy sustainable products, they happen to be more expensive. So now to what extent do you think this is sustainable? Because a lot of livelihoods right now are in question because of job losses. Yes, it makes sense that I can see, so in India, I can see from my home, maybe I can see the Himalayas that I never used to do before. That's great. But if I cannot put bread on the table, so essentially what I'm saying is that once things start picking up, that if I want to go back and focus on sustainability, if the costs go up again, if the prices go up and people cannot afford it, to what extent do we run the risk that, yes, we have seen the planet can heal itself, and would it lead to a false sense of complacency, saying that maybe when the time comes, we'll again shut down and then it'll heal itself, so we don't need to do it now? Are you understanding my question right now? Is that
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I'm of the opinion that this idea that you have to choose either lower price or sustainability is a false choice. Okay. And what I mean by that is one of the reasons that in many instances is the case is that we've not been able to build enough scale in the areas of sustainable products and sustainable services to be able to innovate those technologies and services. And as we innovate those technologies and services and they scale, the prices will come down.
Yeah.
I would argue that at its core, the philosophy of sustainability is one of efficiency. Okay? So think about that. That's a provocative thought. The philosophy of sustainability is a philosophy of efficiency. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to think that a sustainable anything would come with an incremental cost. Okay? The reason it does come with an incremental cost is because there's not enough of it available in a lot of different places. And it's sort of niche-y. And because it's niche-y and you don't have volumes, you don't have free market economics to kind of drive prices down, invest in innovation to be able to get these products and services up the curve as it relates to their own evolution and their own development. So it really is, it's something to think about. You know, there's a couple of other interesting points that I would make is on the back of COVID-19 again, I think people are generally starting to understand how much excess we have in our lives and how much we're forced by this pandemic to embrace a period of minimalism, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I don't know, people forget quickly. I go back to my analogy of the heart attack. The second you have the heart attack, you put yourself on a regimen, you eat well, you exercise because you're scared to death. Fast forward 3-4 years, a lot of people sort of go back to their old habits, and many people have multiple heart attacks on account of the fact that, they really didn't learn, they didn't learn their lesson the first time. But I'm an eternal optimist, and I believe that as we go through this COVID-19 crisis, what people will notice is that minimalism in a figurative sense, right, is that we realize how much we really have and how much excess we really have in the world. And maybe that changes a little bit our way of living,
Agostino, I just want to. I'm going to ask you a difficult question, Agostino, and I'm not saying that you need to give me the answer straight up front. But what role do you, as leaders, play? Because you have to take a look at. Okay, it becomes a chicken or egg. So if I want to have more demand for your sustainable products, because that's the argument that you make, saying that we need more people to be able to afford it as well, right? But to what extent are you forced by shareholders to deliberately make certain margins, so that at what point are we going to ask your shareholders to actually pause for a minute, not put too much pressure on profits to the point where you can lower your price to get people to come up and buy this? Now, I'm not saying dropping it all the way to the point where people can afford it, but to the point where people can say, that's the price I'm willing to pay for it. But that would come at initially sacrificing shareholder value. My point is that as leaders, how are you going to manage that juggling act? Because that is eventually what you will need to do, right?
Yeah, and look, again, these often get played out as choices. I actually think they're an and function versus an or function. And what I mean by that is, if you're a shareholder in a company, you want to know that if you invest $1 or €1, at the end of the year, you'll get $1.03 back or $1.05 or whatever, but you expect a return, okay? And so as a business leader, it's my job to run the business safely, compliantly, intelligently, so that when you invest in my company, at the end of the year, I give you the return that you expected when you invested, okay? So I should not get a free pass as a business leader in terms of delivering on the expectations that you have as an investor of the company that I'm responsible for, is my view. So I park that as kind of point number one. Now, what you said with regards to should we have a lower profit expectation, I actually think that if you do this correctly, the push on sustainability is one that brings to your product portfolio yet another engineering constraint that drives innovation. And to the extent that you can embrace that as a force for innovation, my hypothesis is that your products become more desirable. And because they become more desirable, you can actually charge a little more for them, because the average consumer will perceive that there's value added in the product that you're providing.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Indeed. For me, that's the whole thing. I think what your answer was excellent, because I really think, as you said, it's not an easy job for you as leaders, managing shareholders' expectations while making sure that you are true to a lot of things, including the environment and what we leave behind for our children and future generations as well. And I think this idea of innovation, that it could drive innovation. And this is my opinion. Again, as I said, this is just my thought. I want to ask one more question, which I thought was an interesting thing that I saw, that there was this professor, I forget which university it is. He said maybe every 7 years, we should, as a whole planet, we should say, for 2 months, we're going to take a break. Unlike COVID coming and doing it, but saying that every 7 years, we give to a couple of months where people just spend time with each other, go back to minimalism. I love this idea about how people might be realizing minimalism is the way that actually we are dealing with a lot of excess as well. So what are your thoughts on that?
Look, I don't know. I mean, we have Earth Day, which I think was intended to be the day that we honor, the planet. You know, whether we could do this for 2 months every 7 years, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I actually think it's the equivalent of saying, you know, I'm going to go on a 2-month fast so that I could lose 15 kilos. And then I'll go back to living the way I was before, and I'll probably gain 15, maybe 20 more, right?
Yeah,
so the way to do this, in my view, is evolution versus revolution. And I actually think that at its core, the notion of being more sustainable is good for business. I'm a capitalist at heart, okay? And so I don't think that you have to pick planet at the expense of profit.
Mm.
And I don't think that you have to pick profit at the expense of planet.
Mm.
I think that you can run those two, call them constraints, in your operating plan so that they are virtuous circles as opposed to, you know, a bit of a death spiral.
Yeah.
So that's my fundamental belief. And so when I look to the business that I'm responsible for, I always look through that lens, meaning what's the angle? How do we solve for both planet and profit in this equation? And when you do that, it brings forward ideas and levels of innovation that you never dreamed possible, in fact. So that's why I like it. I like it because it's a catalyst for crazy thinking.
Indeed. And I think that's one of those things where I really think as top leaders, it's great that you think it is something that is important for you as well. Now, let me ask you this. As a leader, what are you doing and how are you kind of instructing your sales teams, right? Because most of the time, the kind of things I get from the audiences that I come in across as sales managers and things like that, they say, yes, we have sustainability as one of the key things in our mission and our vision and stuff like that. But when it comes down to actual KPIs that we have, it still boils down to the numbers that we make. Now, as a leader, what are you trying to do to at least take a look at your sales organization to try and look at how you push sustainability as a value proposition, something unique that Amcor brings and that you want your salespeople to bring to your customers, saying that, yes, you're getting great value, but one of the values that you're also getting is sustainability. Am I making sense out here? Because a lot of
yes. So the way I split that conversation, Deva, is into two discrete components. There's the work that we do within our own four walls, and what I mean by that is, you know, we set targets for ourselves in terms of our greenhouse gas intensity in every plant that we have in the company. So at the plant level, we have a specific goal for greenhouse gas intensity reduction. We have water reduction targets in every plant. We have waste to landfill reduction targets in every plant. We also have policies and procedures that you referenced the sales force. So we encourage them to use greener forms of travel when available. We encourage them to travel in groups versus, you know, 4 people going to a meeting, taking 4 different cars. So that's stuff that we do for ourselves within our own 4 walls, and we have control over that. Then there's the second basket of activity that is the work that we do for our customers. And really that takes on a couple of different forms. There's the intensity that we put into the products that we manufacture. So every product that we make has an environmental footprint in and of itself. There's the materials that we use, and we either now, of late, we're either trying to embed post-consumer recycled content as a raw material into the products that we make. So we're this concept of a circular economy. We're trying to be a good ambassador of the circular economy by bringing recycled material into our value chain. Or we are using materials that are recyclable, meaning that there are existing recycling infrastructures in place that can take those materials, recycle them, and have them re-enter the value chain, either in the form of a new and different resin or in the form of a different product that you can use to make a different type of thing. So first is the energy intensity associated with what we manufacture. Second is the raw materials that we use and making sure that those are either already recycled product or product that can be recycled. And then thirdly, there's, a lot of people don't necessarily appreciate this in the packaging space, but what we do is intended to basically preserve the freshness of food, beverage, medication, medical devices, etc. And if I park medical devices off to the side because they're a bit of a different animal, the ability to maintain food and beverage fresh, safe, consumable for a period of time is really a sustainability effort in and of itself, because think of the food waste problem that we have on the planet.
Interesting indeed. Yeah.
So that's yet another lens where the products that we make, okay, so make them in the most responsible way, use materials that are either already recycled or recyclable, and third, make sure that their purpose is such that we can preserve to the longest extent possible all of this food and beverage so that there's less waste in the world. And that's another sustainability concept, right? The reduction of waste.
Indeed. And to what extent do you think this is valued by your customers? Because I can easily imagine like a Unilever or some of the big multinationals that actually also have this in their vision and mission and stuff like that. So as a salesperson, it's easier for me to deal with those kind of customers. But for the other customers, how do you kind of let your salespeople know how to deal with those customers who might not be paying attention to all of these sustainability issues that are key to you as an organization?
Yeah, that connection point for me is relatively simple. The big brands definitely get it. So some of the ones you just referenced, the conversation is 3 nanoseconds long, and they're there. They're there. The smaller challenger brands, generally speaking, will understand that this is front and center in the consumer's mind, and that more and more the consumer is making a buying decision based on what they know about the sustainability practices of that particular brand. Okay, so there is brand equity associated with the fact that you are a company that cares about this issue. And so I think more and more it's becoming prevalent that this is not something that is a nice to have, that is viewed as extracurricular. In fact, Deva, if you fast forward, I don't consider us of our generation, and I put us kind of in the same generation, we are neither digital natives, nor are we environmental natives. Okay, so we learned this stuff over the course of our lives. The next generation of leaders, okay, those that come in after me and you, my children, okay, my girls are 13 and soon to be 17. As that generation enters the workforce and they take on the positions of leadership that we now occupy, I can tell you that this will be viewed as a fundamental objective of whatever business they're responsible for, because they are both digitally native and environmentally native, in my view.
Absolutely. And I have one last question, because for me that this is still mostly targeted towards salespeople and sales managers. To what extent do you actually as a company do a lot of market research about consumer sentiments about all this, and share this as actually a tool or a kind of something for your salespeople to share with those customers who are not there yet in terms of understanding the importance this has on downstream, market share and everything else?
Yeah, so we do tons is the answer. That I live by the philosophy that if you want to win the heart of your customer, get into the mind of their customer. And so we do that pretty deliberately and quite rigorously, where, if you take one of our customers, generally they would understand almost everything there is to know about how the consumer interacts with their product. Okay? What they generally have less of a view on is how that consumer interacts with the packaging that communicates the promise of the product to that consumer. Okay? So where we aim our consumer insights work, because that's really what it is, it's consumer insights, is not necessarily in trying to duplicate what these large brand owners already know about how their consumers think and feel about the product. We basically point our analysis on how those consumers think and feel about the packaging that surrounds the product. And now we're bringing to our customers insights that are hugely valuable to them because they are not a packaging company and we are. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think in the interest of time, I just want to close with something that I've taken a lot away. And I remember the time that we taught a class for your team of salespeople. I remember the slide that you put forth, and I still think it's so valuable now for this conversation. You had this one slide where you had a lot of people carrying a big piece of rock. And I think you said that everybody does their part in the same direction. And if everybody does 1% better, as a group, we're going to be much farther along. I remember that slide vividly because that's what you're saying even now, right? What you're saying is that this is something that we're all in this together. I think now it's been abused so many times because of COVID, but we're all in this together. But the idea is that it's not going to happen overnight. It's a regimen. I go back to the fact is that you have a choice of either prevention or cure. And whatever it is, it comes back with a lot of practice. You have to do it again with a conscious effort towards we need to move the needle forward towards sustainability. And that's what I really like is that it might look like due to COVID, we might have to go back and rethink this. But I think on the contrary, we should take a look at this as a chance to really ask ourselves, what is it that we stand for? And what are we responsible for, not just for us, but also for future generations?
I agree. You know, I'll make one closing remark, which is I actually think on the back of COVID-19, we're going to double down on this notion of sustainability. So I don't think it becomes less important. I actually think it becomes more important. And secondly is I've always been of the opinion, particularly on this topic, that very small things done by many, many, many people are far more powerful than waiting for a large thing to be done by a large person or entity. Okay, so this is about small things hanging together, making a big difference.
And I think if I want to end that, the COVID actually becomes the big thing that's going to shape it. But if you already have people moving in that right direction, so essentially now is a perfect, for lack of a better word, storm, where you have a big thing coming together as well. But if we are ready for it, and if we have the right mindset, we can really move forward into this. So thank you so much for Agostino for this part on this mega trend. And when we come back the next time, we're going to discuss the Internet of Things. So thank you again. And for everyone, again, as Agostino mentioned, go like, share this to as many people. I know that I'm going to be doing it in my MBA classes and all the classes that I teach. So again, thank you, Agostino, and stay safe. Till the next time.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.